Hi guys, welcome back to the channel and my first actual lightsaber build. So here you can see I've just cut a lovely piece of teak on my bandsaw, then put it into my wood turning lathe and just getting it down to the sort of relatively correct size, and then working off of designs that I got off the internet. I'm just marking all the little points there for the hand grip, for the sort of knurled parts on the middle of the hand grip, as you can see I'm marking out, and then all the front sections of the actual emitter. With this part it was very tricky because I've only got a certain number of lathe chisels and they weren't the correct size, so actually working into this with just the edges of the chisels, just trying to get it still straight and level, was very hard to do. And then here I'm just using a 60-degree chisel just to notch in those little edges into the hand grip. Whilst I was doing that, annoyingly, it caught and actually pulled a big chunk out of the wood. What I decided to do, I cut the ends off here just to neaten it up, and then I decided that actually what I was going to do, I really wasn't pleased with that. As you can see there, a big notch taken out of it. So I cut the actual lightsaber into pieces and decided to remake it in loads of different types of wood. So I used teak, mahogany, ash, poplar, just to make it completely different to ones I'd seen before. And here I'm just lathing out the front shaft, so it's actually the part that makes up the front, the emitter of the lightsaber, and this is just out of a lovely piece of ash. Here, once it's actually chiseled to the correct size, I then go over it with sandpaper to give it a lovely smooth surface, and then it's cutting it to the correct length. And then these are the parts that I actually cut out. So these are from the original piece that I lathed up out of solid teak, and they're cut out, and then I'm drilling into them and then using a rotary tool to eat out the middle section so that they can actually make up the emitter. So they'll then slot over the ash shaft that I just made on the lathe, and then these will slot over it and give a really lovely contrast to that colour. And then once I've sanded these out to the correct size for that shaft there that I'm holding, I then sand them with some 120 and then all the way to 360 grit sandpaper just to get them to be lovely and smooth for the final surface. The next part that I made was back onto the wood turning lathe. So this is actually the very front of the lightsaber. It's the big wide emitter shroud. And this I wanted to really contrast again to the teak pieces that I just showed you how I made. And this is poplar, which is a very bright wood, so it'll contrast nicely. And here I'm just getting it down to about the right size and then drilling out, well, not drilling, I'm carving out with the chisels the centre section there so it will slot over the shaft. Finally, just sanding off so it has a lovely smooth surface. The next section is actually working and making the new hand grips. So the photo that or the still that I showed you earlier on in this video of the part that actually caught and notched a huge chunk out, this is then making that part. So what I decided to do was make it out of lots of different sections of wood, which in my head it was a good idea, and in reality it turned out to be very hard, but it was a good fun challenge though. Here you can see I'm just making one of the V sections for the hand grip, and then notching it out and then cutting it off at the right size. And then this white poplar is a lovely bright contrast to that mahogany that I was just using then, and it's making the sections in between those V-grooves. And here in the videos I've only showed you making one of each of them, but I had to, as you can see from this photo, make several and then glue them all together, and this is using epoxy resin, so it's a really strong bond. And I glued each of them together into sort of groups of 5 or 6, and then using long bolts, nuts and washers I then clamped them together, and then when they had dried, took those apart and then added more, and then bolted it together again and slowly built up the size that I needed until it was all strongly sort of glued and bonded together. Then onto more sections of the hand grip. So this is actually the knurled pieces at the back of the very back, where the belt ring actually latches onto. So this is just cutting out of a piece of ash there, just the correct widths, and then I go and cut the widths into correct sort of height as well. And then using a belt sander, I then sand them into the correct shape, into these sort of almost small chocolate blocks, look like little bits of white chocolate blocks that then glue onto the back of the handle. Then this is actually making the activation plate, the sort of switch that turns the lightsaber on. And this was again from a piece of ash, just to contrast against the teak that I was using for the rest of the handle. And cutting it to the correct size there, and then again sand it nice and smooth. And with this I had to get a rounded edge so that it would fit correctly onto the teak handle. And here this is making more sections of the activation plate, and it's cutting out of a piece of old scrap mahogany that I had. It's cutting out the edges, and then once I've cut these edges out, I also then cut out pretty much the best way to describe them is a load of miniature matchsticks. So this is out of a piece of poplar, just very small little slithers that I can then glue together onto the activation plate itself to make the switch. And here I'm just sanding them using 120 grit sandpaper. Then finally glued all those little tiny matchstick sections together onto the activation switch, and then using a tiny hacksaw just cut off all the edges nice and clean, nice and neatly. Using glue, I then attach the 2 little slithers of mahogany that I cut out before on the bandsaw. And then again using a hacksaw there, just cut off the edges and clean it off with sandpaper. For these sections I did wonder about using plastic to make the green and red triangular sort of lights there, but I thought it'd look a lot better if I just kept it in the contrasting wood. And then this is onto the belt loop itself, the belt ring. So this is a really cool little triangular piece. I just wanted to, I didn't know if it would actually turn out, if it'd be strong enough, but used the mahogany again, and it's a lovely cool little solid piece it turned out, just using the rotary tool just to carve its shape there. And this is gluing those little white chocolate blocks that I said about onto the back of the handle. And the last one is the one that contains the belt loop there. And now onto the exciting part, where the whole thing starts to take shape and actually looks like a lightsaber now, instead of just a load of random bits of wood. So it's gluing the bits of the handle together, and the activation plate or activation switch onto the handle then. Then the next section is using glue just to attach the ash shaft that I made earlier on in the video. Then the crystal lens, this middle section made of teak, and the actual emitter shroud on with glue just at the correct distance onto the shaft. And the last bit is the actual emitter shroud, the end, the larger piece that I made again at the very beginning of the video, just out of poplar, and that just has a few dabs of glue just to hold it onto the front of the shroud. And the last process was to actually coat the entire lightsaber in a layer of satin varnish. It's actually a layer on the video, but technically it took 4 layers, which give it a really gorgeous deep shine. I'm really, really pleased with the way that it actually contrasts between the lighter and darker colours there. And just want to say thank you so much for watching. Hope you enjoyed it. Please like, comment and subscribe for more. Thank you.